Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we are on day 230 and we're covering Dignitatis Humanae 2, which is on each person has a right to religious liberty. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about how the modern world has emphasized human dignity, which is good, and this dignity applies to freedom of conscience, which in turn implies religious liberty. Today we're going to talk again, kind of in a different angle, that human freedom, religious freedom, is based on human dignity as images of God and spiritual beings, and the law should reflect this religious freedom. So, we have 3 subparagraphs in paragraph 2 here today, and these, we're going to read A and B together because they're a little shorter than C. A and B, the summary is man has a right to religious freedom based on dignity, and this should be respected in law. And C is about religious freedom is based on human dignity and our spiritual nature, our image and likeness of God, our intellect and will, things like that. So let's begin right away reading 2A and B. A. This Vatican Council declares that the human person has a right to religious freedom. This freedom means that all men are to be immune from coercion on the part of individuals or of social groups and of any human power, in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to his own beliefs, whether privately or publicly, whether alone or in association with others, within due limits. B. The Council further declares that the right to religious freedom has its foundation in the very dignity of the human person, as this dignity is known through the revealed word of God and by reason itself. This right of the human person to religious freedom is to be recognized in the constitutional law whereby society is governed and thus is to become a civil right. Pretty straightforward, as you might notice. The first sentence here is basically, the declaration of the point of this whole document. The human person has a right to religious freedom. That's going to be the point. Now, a little note, sometimes in English people make a distinction between religious freedom and religious liberty. In Latin, the term is the same. Freedom, it just comes from our Germanic roots, liberty from the Latin roots. So the distinction is not really clear in Latin. If you want to make that distinction in English, it's fine. I've been using them kind of interchangeably here. So now moving on to the second sentence of paragraph 2A, it talks about what does this mean. It means that we don't coerce people. We don't coerce them to act in a way contrary to their beliefs. The freedom is for both public and private, and both for groups and individuals. That an individual can pray the rosary walking down the street, and an individual can have a parade for, or a procession for their saint or for, some Hindu god or something on the feast day of that Hindu god. And obviously this is within limits, it notes. And the next paragraph C, is going to say, in order to maintain public order. And this is really to make sure that they don't break natural law in harming others. So if a religion wants to, for example, do human sacrifice, that would not be religious liberty because you have to protect that human from being sacrificed. Or if they want to mutilate children, same thing, right? You have a religious liberty to do things on your own and to do minor things with your kids, right? You can raise your kids in your religion, but you can't mutilate them. You can't kill other people or things like that. There are certain religious ceremonies where adults, cut themselves, bleed intentionally, and that would be within the realm because it's not a mortal wound, and a small bleed is not going to cause significant harm to the person. The person is freely choosing it. That wouldn't be the issue. But if it's doing that to others, or harming others, or suicidal in that sense would also be an issue. And then paragraph 2b really talks about the dignity, right? It's human dignity. This is based on Imago Dei, the image and likeness of God. The Imago Dei just means image of God in Latin. And so this is what we are talking about. Because we're made in the image and likeness of God, we have this freedom and we should respect this freedom. And this is revealed in the Bible. The Bible has taught us that we are the image and likeness of God, right? You go back to Genesis 1, 26, 27, 28 there. That part about the creation of man, it talks about that aspect of us, that we are made in the image and likeness of God. When I teach like social doctrine or bioethics, I spend a bunch of time the first week basically explaining this part of the Bible because it's so important, I think, for modern analysis of Catholic teaching and things like that. And obviously, we did note in paragraph 1 that secular society helped us realize this, but this doesn't negate that we can see the origin of this in the Bible. And this is something that is a biblical value. Now, the second sentence of paragraph 2b talks about how the law should recognize it. So this is recognition of the current political order and to say that the law should recognize religious liberty. Now, this doesn't mean that a state can't be confessionally some religion, whether it be Catholic or Muslim or something. If 85, 90, 95% of the population is the same religion, there's not inherently a problem with the state being that religion. The problem is if this, in favoring that religion or in some ways make it easier. But if there's coercive things like an extra tax if you're not that religion or issues of forced conversions and things like that, that is problematic. So moving on to our final part today, 2C is religious freedom is based on human dignity and our spiritual nature, right? So 2A here talked about the image and likeness of God briefly. Here we're going to go in depth more and talk about our spiritual nature, our intellect and will, and that is based on us being the image and likeness of God. So let's read it. 2C. It is in accordance with dignity as persons, that is, beings endowed with reason and free will and therefore privileged to bear personal responsibility, that all men should be at once impelled by nature and also by a moral obligation to seek the truth, especially religious truth. They are also bound to adhere to the truth once it is known, and to order their whole lives in accordance with the demands of truth. However, men cannot discharge these obligations in a manner and keep with their own nature, unless they enjoy immunity from external coercion as well as from psychological freedom. Therefore, the right to religious freedom has its foundation not in the subjective disposition of the person, but in his very nature. In consequence, the right to this immunity continues to exist even in those who do not live up to their obligation of seeking the truth and adhering to it. And the exercise of this right is not to be impeded provided that just public order be observed. So as I noted that before, that just public order is about, limits on religious liberty, religious freedom. And here we're talking about spiritual beings, right? We have intellect and will. We have the ability to know and the ability to choose that are spiritual, not just physical, because physical is deterministic. That's why animals are relatively deterministic. If you breed this dog to do this and you train them, they're going to do that. But human beings, yes, they'll have tendencies. You'll have tendencies to be like your parents, right? And our biology is very much following those tendencies. If people see me and my mom, they're like, how did that happen with the height? Because I'm like a foot or more than a foot taller than my mom. But they see me and my dad, and it's like, how did that happen with the face? Because my face looks just like my mom, even though my body looks just like my dad. Anyways, not exactly, but very much for whatever reason, that's what I look like compared to my parents. But we do have that, kids look like their parents, of course. But this spiritual aspect is what makes us responsible. And to be responsible, we need to be able to seek the truth. And we're going to be impelled to seek the truth. And we're bound to follow the truth once that's known, right? Because we look for truth. And then if I understand that it's true that so-and-so killed somebody, if I'm the person who's the police, whatever, I have to then arrest that person, prosecute them, everything else like that. If I'm not sure, then I still have to keep investigating if I'm the police. And the same thing in our own lives. We have to base our lives on truth. We're obliged to follow that. And obviously the highest truth is religious truth. It's what we know about God and the higher beings, not just what we know about gravity or, snails or things like that. And in order to have this freedom, in order to be responsible in this way, there needs to be no external coercion to seek the truth freely. And religious freedom ensures this. Now, it's not to say that all motives for religion that aren't religious in themselves are bad. For example, if a Catholic church offers a soup kitchen and people are moved by that, by Christian charity, or some people receiving all that food are like, oh, I'm moved to really look into Catholicism because they're helping out, that's perfectly fine. That's not coercion. That is providing a benefit, but it isn't coercive. Coercive is, if you don't do this, then there's going to be some bad thing happen to you and things like that. And we don't know exactly which people are fully following it, so we have to give this fully following the truth as they know it, so we have to give this freedom to all. And finally, maintaining public order. As noted above in paragraph 2A there, we have those limits on religious liberty based on natural law and harming others. And suicide, or if that's a possibility. Anyways, Let's conclude today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. We have options for one-time monthly donations as well as joining the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Dignitatis Humanae 3, which is on how humans come to divine truth. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which will provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, such as a reading plan and playlists, please go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. We also have an SQPN Discord server at sqpn.com/Discord, and the channel for Vatican II in a Year, which I check out every week or two.
Amen.